Good morning, everyone. My name is Christian Amato Ali, PhD candidate at USP, and today I'll be presenting a paper of mine titled Comparative Assessment of Food Loss and Climatic Risks in Dairy Farming Systems between Fiji and Australia. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge my supervisor, Dr. Hilda, who's seated at the back today, as well as my other supervisors, Dr. William Uyese and Dr. Gayatri McCullough. Just a brief look at the outline of my presentation today. We have an introduction, methodology, key findings, implications, and conclusion. To my introduction, food loss and waste is a global challenge impacting not only food security, economic development, but also the environment. Food loss defined within reference to Pacific Island countries is any change in the availability, edibility, and quality of food that prevents it from being consumed by people. Every year, approximately 13.8%, or roughly $400 billion, goes to waste before it even reaches consumers, with this staggering figure highlighting the urgency to address food loss across the entire supply chain. Food loss in the dairy industry is unique as it involves two aspects: milk loss and feed loss. For the Pacific Islands, unique challenges like limited infrastructure, difficult market access, fragmented value chains, and the intensifying effects of climate change all amplify the risks of food loss. One notable research gap in the Pacific region is the lack of focus of food loss in dairy farming systems, as well as the connection between food loss and climate resilience. My objective for this research was to provide a comparative assessment of food loss in dairy farming systems between two geographically distinct regions, Fiji and Australia, with my three research questions being firstly to identify key factors contributing to food loss in dairy farming systems on-farm and post-farm in Fiji, and compare this with factors to those in Australia. Secondly, I looked at the extent to which climate and environmental conditions influence food loss within dairy farming systems, both through forage loss and milk loss in both countries. And finally, I conducted a comparative analysis of farming in Fiji and Australia. Moving forward to my methodology, our study sites included the Greater Corvo region in the province of Tailevu in Fiji and the Murray Dairy region in northern Victoria, Australia. Data collection included a mixed methods approach that involved a scoping review that looked at food loss and climate resilience in the Pacific, surveys and key informant interviews between Australian and Fijian dairy farmers. We also looked at climate data that was collected using the online Australian Dairy Climate Portal, as well as with help from Fiji Meteorological Services. And on-farm and post-harvest data was collected using a combination of interview surveys, on-field observations, both on-farm and past-farm through storage and transportation. Key findings. What this research managed to find is, firstly, we measured monthly temperature and rainfall temperatures, as well as yearly temperature and rainfall trends. And for this, we looked at the years 2014 to 2024 for Cornivia and Londoni. Cornivia, which is right next to the capital of Suva, recorded maximum temperatures of 31 degrees through the months of February, with lower minimum temperatures at 20 degrees around July, averaging rainfall of 388 mm at its highest in March, with Londoni, which is the closest weather station to the farming locations in Fiji. This site measured maximum temperatures of 32 degrees in February, with 20.6 degrees in August and an average of 449 mm of rainfall at its highest in December. Cornivia showed more stable but slightly increasing trends in temperature, while Londoni exhibited a general warming trend in both maximum and minimum temperatures over the decade. For yearly trends, Londoni consistently recorded higher temperatures than Cornivia, as well as a higher annual rainfall than Cornivia. For Australia, we highlighted data from 2000 to 2024 for Shepparton region and the Victoria State in general. Shepparton experienced below 0 degree weather which is the lowest in months of July, and exceeded 40 degrees in months of January and December, having lower rainfall than Victoria as a whole, with monthly averages below 40 mm. Victoria, on the other hand, had more stable temperatures with minimums above 5 degrees and maximums around 25 degrees throughout the months, consistently recording higher rainfall exceeding 40 mm in most months. This was generally between May and October. Dairy farming systems, as mentioned, experience food loss at multiple stages, and these are both influenced both by direct and indirect factors that impact milk production and quality, both on-farm and off-farm. Food loss in dairy farming systems is unique as it stems from the effect of loss of forage, as well as factors that affect the cow directly, contributing to the loss of milk. Forage loss on dairy farms pose a significant challenge to the sustainability of farming systems, impacting the availability of feed and ultimately dairy production. Factors that were highlighted by farmers were divided into categories, with the first category being farm resources and management. Farmers highlighted that land tenure and competition, forage varieties available, and support from government extension officers were factors that contributed to forage loss, with climate and environmental stresses identified by farmers as flooding, droughts, and pests and diseases. Milk loss. In cows, we had 3 categories, which included the farm resource management and climate and environmental stresses, with a 3rd category that involved animal health and milk production that impacted the cow directly. For this, factors highlighted by farmers under climate and environmental stresses were heat stress as paramount, and this was supported by flooding and droughts. For resource management, farmers mentioned forage quality and everything that linked to forage loss in the previous slide. They also mentioned grazing areas, milking infrastructure, labor availability and feed availability and cost, with impacts on animal health and milk production being access to veterinary services, the breed type, and common occurrences of disease outbreak. This all leads back to form a big chart that describes food loss causes in dairy farming industries. Looking at our implications and what this means for dairy farming in both countries, we were able to highlight a comparison of different contingency plans for farmers in Victoria and Fiji. Australian farmers generally had a structured, tiered approach to manage climate risks, ranging from a plan A, where they had everyday resilience, proactive preparedness that allowed them to stockpile on feed, use shed structures, ventilation for heat, as well as ensure water security, to a plan E in the case of consecutive climate disasters, where they were able to take out insurance claims or, in worst cases, sell off a significant portion of their farm or their herd to cut these losses. Fiji's dairy industry, however, only operates reactively and has no plan A. Farmers in Fiji typically have limited to no access to stored feed, rely on rain-fed pastures, and face inconsistent water availability. Without a clear plan A, Fiji's dairy farmers entered crisis mode much earlier when climate challenges arise. In summary, climate change is significantly affecting dairy farming operations, necessitating adaptive strategies. While Australia has plans A to F to ensure comprehensive preparedness, Pacific Island farmers often only have, or in this case, don't have a plan A, which leaves them vulnerable to unpredictable conditions. Younger generations are now shying away from these challenges, further complicating the situation as they are not taking over the family dairy business, resulting in a potential decline in agricultural sustainability and economic stability in these communities. To conclude, the farming dairy industry in the Pacific is dying a slow death. Younger generations are increasingly reluctant to take up the helm, further exacerbating the decline. The stresses of climate change and food loss only worsen the situation, highlighting the urgent need for comprehensive contingency plans and greater support for agricultural sustainability. Without these measures, the future of dairy farming in these regions is increasingly uncertain. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christian. We have over 5 minutes, so if anybody would like to ask a question, the microphone's here. Please give your name and ask your question.
Thank you, Christian, for that wonderful presentation. It was really comprehensive. My question will probably come on from the climate side, that they're looking at the data they're working. I think it's from 2 of the climate data to have that one there. Well, we're climate scientists. We are concerned most is on the data availability now, how long this data that we're looking at. For Australia, they do have data that dates back to 2000, which is what you're looking at. For the Fiji, is the one I'm a bit concerned with. Your data, the one you're looking at, just goes back to around 2016-15, which is it's a lot less than 10 years. And that will probably give you, I mean, if you want to look at the trend of climate, for example, the temperature they're looking at, with that data, you probably might give you the area of the trend that you're trying to look at, the temperature. Is there any way that you want to probably extrapolate that to look to go back to, I don't know, 2000 or 1900, so that can your data, your climate data, or particularly sea surface, not sea surface, but temperature data, will give you a more comprehensive trend of the rise of temperature? Or is it to do with the availability of data at the in situ data, observational data that you got, that limits your climate data? Or is that anything that that hampers your data to just back to 2015, rather than going back to around 1900 or 2000? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The reason that we only had data from the last decade, from 2014, was because the London weather station was set up in 2014, and this is the weather station that's the closest to the study site. I think it's less than 4 km from where the study was taken. I put Cornivia because that's, in my opinion, the next closest to where London is, and that Cornivia weather site does have data that I think goes back to 1980. We don't have it on this graph because I thought it was not best to show on a yearly trend graph, but we do have a monthly weather graph that shows that adds a third point that shows a normal, that shows weather from, I think, 1970 to 2020. And it just shows a comparison between these same dates with the normal in that monthly temperature and rainfall graph. So yeah, main reason is that Londoni was just set up 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and I thought that it was best to show this rather than have a weather station that was quite far away.
Thank you very much. That's very, very interesting. I was wondering about the differences between the farms in Australia and in Fiji. Is there big differences, for example, regarding the size of the herd? I mean, how many cows there?
So for my study site in Fiji, I interviewed roughly 30 farmers. And for all of those 30 farmers, their herd size varied from 25 to 50, with only, I think, 3 going close to 100. Whereas I interviewed roughly 15 in Australia, and all of those 15 had herd sizes of more than 200. So, yeah, there was a big change, but I guess it's all relevant to the conditions. We have size of farm and all of these other things that contributed. And particularly, one point I like to stress out is that dairy farming in Fiji is not lucrative. Farmers mentioned that they're not into this for the money. This is something that their forefathers had been doing, and the cows were the same cows that their forefathers had. They bred them, it came all the way down, and now this is the few amount of cows that they have, and they really can't let go of. So they're just in it because they treat the cows similar to like their siblings, because this is all they've known. They've known them from when they were growing up, and this is kind of why they can't really let go. And it's also why then the next generation is not into it, because there's no money in it.
So this leads to my second question. Do you think that dairy farming is a sustainable activity that should be pursued in Fiji, or more generally speaking, is it sustainable? Do you think it is a sustainable activity?
I think for the Tai-Levu region, it is. There's a lot of land. It just has to do with issues of tenure. A lot of the dairy farms 30, 40 years ago were run by Indo-Fijians, and the leases that they had all expired within the last 5 to 10 years. And this caused a drastic shift. So you had a lot of the dairy farmers that were left without land, and the landowners were not willing to take up dairy. I think if the government looks into it, which they are, they've increased the national budget quota for the dairy industry. I think it was 500,000 in 2023. Last year it got bumped up to 10 million, which is like 20 times what it was. So the government is putting the money into it. It's just, as I mentioned before, the extension services that the government needs to provide to help these, I would say, relatively new farmers come up. But if not, I think it is sustainable in the long run. Just like the farmers in Australia have mentioned, they just need to tough out the first 3 to 5 years, and then it should be sail smoothing from there.